Welcome into the Stack Shack Sports Show. Today we're going to be talking about the NFL. Apologies from me. This past week I got really sick, had to cancel my Super Bowl party, so there wasn't a lot of content on the channel. But I did watch the game and I do have a bunch of thoughts, so let's jump straight into this. Kansas City, the Dynasty is here. They win a thriller. An absolute fantastic game. We have been absolutely spoiled the last few years in the Super Bowl. Every single one of these games has been super close. Kansas City gets the big win over San Francisco. This is a rematch from 2020 as far as Kansas City and San Francisco are concerned. And once again, Kansas City gets the best of them. This was my prediction going into this game. We did pretty well on the bets overall. But I wanted to talk first about this dynasty that is here. The dynasty has arrived. Kansas City winning back-to-back Super Bowls. Mahomes looking dominant. This defense absolutely smothering. And yeah, they're a dangerous team, and I don't see them really slowing down. You know, last year the thing was, oh, this defense is really young. How will they match up against the Eagles, right? And then this year, oh man, they don't really have a number one wide receiver. Rashee Rice shows up in a big way in the playoffs. Kelsey turns back the time, turns back the clock, and looks like a younger version of himself. All of a sudden, this team that during the regular season we had some serious concerns about. They led the league in drops. They struggled really to win as many games as normal. And yet here they are, once again, Super Bowl champions. All of those concerns, the concerns about the offense not being productive, the concerns about is Kelsey getting old or is he distracted, things not going their way, maybe, in all facets of the game, and yet they stormed straight through. They didn't have home field advantage, right? Something they've had previously. They had to win some games on the road. It's honestly quite remarkable, quite an accomplishment from Kansas City, what they did. This is one of the more impressive runs of the Patrick Mahomes 3 Super Bowl wins, and you know, they've been to more Super Bowls than that. But of all their Super Bowl runs, I think this was the most impressive. It really is starting to cement Patrick Mahomes as on pace to compete for that GOAT status with Brady. There's plenty of graphics all out there. They're almost identical, except Patrick has better yards, better touchdowns, and less interceptions. But as far as the championships won, the Super Bowls, they're really starting to look like the same resume. If Mahomes can keep it up for longer, I think he will pass Brady. And I don't even think he needs to keep it up necessarily for as long. But if he gets similar numbers of Super Bowls and continues to have the gap in just much better numbers than Brady did, you're going to have to give it to Mahomes here pretty soon. But Brady remains the GOAT. I don't want to hear Mahomes is the best quarterback of all time. He's not quite there yet. Maybe right now he's playing at a level. Absolutely. No one would argue with that, I don't think, that he could be the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. But when we're talking these greatest of all time debates, I need to see it for at least as long or close to as long as the guy you're competing against, Tom Brady. Tom Brady, obviously one of only 2 quarterbacks to ever beat Mahomes in the playoffs. That's quite a ridiculous stat. Mahomes, unless it's Brady or Burrow one time, Mahomes is getting the win. And Kansas City is here to stay. Who can stop them? I don't know. The only team that's ever stopped them that's still, the same quarterback would be Joe Burrow and the Bengals. So we'll see what the Bengals can do next year. They've got an interesting offseason with a lot of cap space, but they also want to try and keep T. Higgins potentially. How is that all going to work out? Where does Boyd end up? They're into the stage that Kansas City has been the last couple years where, maybe you can't keep everybody. You're starting to pay your quarterback a lot more. Kansas City's figured it out. Mahomes has elevated the players around him and proven that, I don't need Tyreek Hill to win a Super Bowl, right? I don't need the best offensive line in football. The tackles were a bit suspect this year. but they're finding different ways to win, and that's what winners do, is they find different ways to win. So could not be more impressed with Kansas City and their performance in this Super Bowl. Which brings us to the 49ers. What happened, right? 49ers, again, just like in 2020, had a lead. And here comes Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and they take it back. Okay? Tough loss for San Francisco. I really do feel like this was San Francisco's year, if they were going to make it happen. Some of the key pieces, a Bosa, Deebo Samuel, a George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, they were all healthy. And that has been something that hasn't happened in previous games, right? Last year, Purdy got hurt. We've had Deebo injuries. They were all healthy. Now, I'm not going to say they were perfectly healthy. You know, they lose a linebacker. Deebo went out for a couple of plays. But I think you are, just because of the style of players they have and the age of the players they have, I think the window is starting to close in San Francisco. Now, Purdy is still very inexpensive, so you can continue to build around him with some free agents and pieces, but the Kittle, Deebo, McCaffrey, McCaffrey, before coming to San Francisco, had a lot of injury problems. He hasn't really in San Francisco, which has been pretty remarkable, but I don't know how many years left these core players are going to have where all of them are healthy and they can still afford everybody. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be tough. That defense is already starting to feel maybe a little on the older side. So I'm a little worried for San Francisco. I think they'll still be good next year, but that window seems to be closing a little bit. Kansas City, I don't really see the window closing because it's kind of, as long as we got Mahomes, Rice is a rookie. Yes, Travis Kelce is going to be a huge loss when he eventually retires, but he seems, maybe he's going to go a couple more years. But even then, you still have Mahomes, and you've seen Mahomes win with lots of different types of weapons. This is the best San Francisco team in a long time, and they still couldn't get it done. The defense for Kansas City is still young, right? They're not going anywhere. Chris Jones, we'll have to see how that goes. Snead, I believe, is up for a contract as well, but I just have a little more faith in Kansas City. They've shown year in and year out, missing players, changing players out, swapping roles. San Francisco, even this regular season, Deebo went out for a couple of games and they lost a bunch of games, right? If the core offense doesn't stay together because of injury or contract issues, I don't know where San Francisco has to go. Again, Purdy is still cheap. He will be for a couple more years because he's on the rookie deal. But beyond that, what do you got there in San Francisco? I would be concerned if I was a San Francisco fan. As far as this game, what happened in this game, I really do think this game came down to which quarterback was going to be able to make the plays. Which offense, really. It's not even just which quarterback, because we give the edge to Mahomes as a quarterback over Purdy, but we felt coming into the game with all of the weapons Purdy has, maybe he would have a chance. And it really came down to which offense would be dominant. Kansas City scored on their last 4 drives. San Francisco did not. They lose. Purdy really struggled against the blitz, struggled to find options, and put up, big numbers. If we look at the stat line, Purdy threw for 250 yards, but this is not a good stat line for Purdy. It's not what you're looking for. 250 yards, 23 of 38. That is not his typical accuracy. It's a decent yards per completion, but you don't really want Purdy throwing it 38 times. I don't think that's ideal. Mahomes threw it a bunch. The other thing that really came down is, look at this rushing receiving yards. It was McCaffrey. That was their offense. Purdy really struggled to get the ball downfield. Part of that, you have to give immense credit to the Chiefs' defense. It has shut down everybody on this run. It's been a great, historically great defense. And it showed up again on Sunday. But that's a situation where, you have all these offensive weapons and McCaffrey's leading your receptions. He couldn't really get it to Debo, really struggled, right? Mahomes actually led Kansas City in rushing, made some big plays with his legs down the stretch. Travis Kelce, once again, was quite productive. 9 catches, 93 yards. Big third down catches, big plays when they needed them. And that's what it came down to. Both defenses were very good. The Chiefs' offense was just a little bit more productive, especially on third down and in those big spots at the end of games. And that's what you pay your quarterback for. That's what you need a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, a Josh Allen. That's what you need them for. It's interesting watching this game. I never felt like Kansas City was out of it. And that's what you really got to do. You got to put Kansas City away. The teams that have beaten Kansas City, and there's not many of them. Remember, only 2 quarterbacks ever have beaten Mahomes in the playoffs, and only one of them is still in the NFL, and he only beat him once, right? Burrow only got him once. He didn't get him last year in the AFC title game. So, he's very difficult to beat. The Chiefs team, this dynasty that's growing, doesn't have a lot of losses. It's Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. But in both of those scenarios, those elite quarterbacks, Brady and Burrow, really put the game away, and they got a lot of good defensive pressure. This game, San Francisco got a lot of good defensive pressure. Bosa played really well. Chase Young showed up in a big way, in a way that he hasn't really previously. Showed why he was a number 1 pick. But Purdy couldn't get it done. Purdy couldn't put him away. And if you let him hang around, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are going to cook up something pretty spectacular, and they did. You also have to give a nod to San Francisco's special teams errors in this one. The blocked extra point. That completely changed the strategy of the game, right? It went from Chiefs are going to need a touchdown to Chiefs are only going to need a field goal, which is what sent us to overtime. So that was huge. And then, talk about a momentum switch, the muffed punt. And really, it wasn't muffed. It bounced off somebody else's leg. It wasn't necessarily on the returner. But him not just diving and falling on the ball, trying to pick it up and not picking it up, that ended up being a huge momentum switch, because at that point in the game, Kansas City really was not moving the ball. They were not getting progress. They were not getting good field position. They couldn't get it in the end zone. They couldn't get it near the end zone. And then all of a sudden you gifted them the ball on the 15 or whatever it was. And they end up scoring a touchdown from that. And all of a sudden, wow, they're back in this game. So when you look at it, you got to understand, you got to put them away. You can't make a mistake like that. And special teams really hurt San Francisco, really changed the course of the game. The other thing is, on the one time Mahomes made the big mistake, his one interception, that was a bad interception. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was a bad throw. He completely missed. Honestly, I'm not sure who he was throwing to for sure, because he threw it so far over Kelce's head. I wonder if he was trying to hit the receiver over the top, but he was double covered. It was a bad throw. Mahomes finally makes a mistake. He hadn't thrown a pick in the playoffs in forever. He finally does. And that defense showed up, and San Francisco could not capitalize on it. Kansas City shut him down. Got the ball back, no points off of that turnover. That was another huge situation. And that's a situation where you need this offense that has Hall of Famers everywhere. They've got to capitalize on a situation like that and really start putting the game away. They didn't, and Mahomes and the Chiefs, give them credit. They fought back. That defense, give it credit for stiffening up off of the turnover and not giving up points. Ta-da, you end up with the Kansas City Chiefs victory. I know people are going to talk about refereeing because that's what we've been talking about a lot in the NFL. I thought it was a very well refed game. There's always going to be, there's a missed holding call here or whatever. Some little things. But I didn't feel like they injected themselves or changed the course of the game, which I was really appreciative of. Last couple of Super Bowls, we had really, fans would say maybe ticky-tack holding calls in both the last two, the Eagles holding call and the Bengals holding call, that really changed kind of courses of the game. I was happy to see that there weren't any in this one. There was the one big holding call against Kansas City, but that was a pretty obvious one, I feel like. Ayuk beat him on that route. It felt like the right call. We had some procedural penalties, but overall it was a very clean game. I think maybe only 6 or 7 penalties on either side. Pretty evenly called game. I didn't have any problems with the officiating. I know some people are going to find things to be mad at, but come on. Not a big deal. So the only other big thing I think left to talk about is the overtime situation and the fact that San Francisco won the toss, took the ball. This is getting a lot of controversy online, and it's come out post-game that San Francisco players, they didn't really understand the overtime rules for the playoffs. And I'll be honest, as a longtime fan of the NFL, until they put up the graphic and started talking about it a little bit, I didn't realize how different the rules were in the playoffs for overtime. So if you missed this, during the regular season, overtime rules are there's a coin toss, the team that gets the ball first. If that team scores a touchdown, the game is over. That's it. Game over. If they kick a field goal, the other team then has an opportunity, gets to possess the ball and have a chance to either tie it again with a field goal, in which play on, you kick it off to the next team, or score a touchdown and they win it if they score a touchdown in that second possession. Okay? If the clock runs out, the game ends in a tie, if it is, still tied, right? Well, I thought in the playoffs, well, obviously they're not going to let the Super Bowl end in a tie, so it would just continue on in overtime periods, kind of like a quarter would. But in overtime, in the playoffs, there's an additional rule. No matter what the first score is, or at least what the outcome of the first possession is, we should say, the other team is going to get the ball. So this is why in the regular season, you always want the ball as the team that wins the coin toss. Because if you go down and score a touchdown, game's over. You don't have to give it over to the other team. Well, in the playoffs, because there's a guaranteed 2 possessions, there can be a lot of discussion regarding, do you want the ball first or last? In college, where there's a guaranteed 2 possessions, and it comes in from the 25-yard line, everybody always says you want to go second because that way you know what you need, right? If your defense is able to stop the team that has the ball first and they don't score at all, then you know as the second team, I just need to kick a field goal. If they kick a field goal like San Francisco did, Kansas City knows, we can win the game with a touchdown and the game's just over, right? That can be an inherent advantage. Now, there are positives towards the other side as well. You can make an argument that San Francisco made the right decision, but what I do think is interesting is that the San Francisco players did not actually understand this fully, or at least are claiming not to have. Shanahan seems to be comfortable and seems to have an argument as to why they took the ball first. Is he just defending his players for making that decision? I think he probably really did want the ball. The defense was tired, hadn't been able to really stop Mahomes. Let's go get a touchdown, put the pressure on. Then if Mahomes scores a touchdown, we get the third possession, and its next possession wins after those first 2 scores. So, you can see the argument for it, But I do think it's interesting that the players did not really understand it. But the Kansas City Chiefs players seem to have all understood it. They're talking about how they were practicing for this, prepping for this scenario and what they would do in these different scenarios. And that's just great coaching there from Andy Reid. Now, I'm not going to rip Shanahan for his players not fully understanding the overtime rules. It's okay. I don't think that was the big decision. I think that's fans wanting to find, oh, well, we should have let them have the ball first and we would have been fine and we could have won. No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's a completely game-changing decision. Both teams are going to get possession. I think there's a reasonable argument either way. Personally, I would probably side with the take the ball second option, but I don't know how the defense is feeling. Maybe Bosa was really tired. Maybe they wanted more time to let Mahomes sit on the bench for a while. Hopefully he'll cool off, right? He had just come down and scored. So there you go. Maybe that's the argument. I can understand it. And obviously, if San Francisco scores a touchdown, then Kansas City scores a touchdown. Well, now it's San Francisco who just needs to go kick a field goal to win the game, right? So there are arguments for San Francisco. I personally would probably defer, give it to the other team. But that was an interesting wrinkle and something that maybe, like me, you weren't aware about until you got into the game. That the overtime rule is different than the regular season rule. Now, it doesn't often happen, right, that we have a Super Bowl go to overtime, but things to remember, and this was the first overtime since this rule change. Apparently, it's happened actually a couple of years ago. They actually changed the rule for overtime in the playoffs specifically, but this is the first time we've got to see it, so I thought that was an interesting note, an interesting wrinkle of strategy that we'd never really seen play out, and what were teams going to do with that. San Francisco made the decision they did, were not able to score a touchdown, only kicked the field goal. Kansas City drives down and scores the touchdown with 3 seconds to go in the first overtime. If the 3 seconds had gone, it would have just been like a quarter break, right? First to second quarter. Kansas City would have still had the ball with a whole new overtime period of time left. So that was not a tense moment as far as, oh, we got only 3 seconds left, we got to score now. That's not the situation. It's just another quarter would be added on after those 3 seconds. We didn't need to go to double overtime or the second overtime period as Kansas City walked off. What a win. What a win. What a game. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of the game. I think we'd all agree that Kansas City can start calling themselves a bit of a dynasty at the moment. But what are your thoughts on San Francisco? Will they be back? Or is the curtain starting to close on their opportunities of Super Bowl champions? Let me know in the comments down below, and we'll see you tomorrow.